Hey friends, Jeff here with a new episode of Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Today we welcome to the show Jill Pellegrino. Jill is the CEO at AutoCruitment. AutoCruitment are experts in targeting and qualifying patients for clinical trials with direct-to-patient recruitment. And they've been doing this for over 10 years. Jill has been in her role as CEO since the beginning of 2024. Who Jill is to me is the word joy. There's joy that Jill takes in investing in other people, specifically women leaders who are up and coming. There's joy in Jill around creatively solving the problem with her team of recruiting patients for clinical trials. And at the heart of everything that she and her team do is unlocking the power of the patient. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Jill Pellegrino. Jill Pellegrino, welcome to the show. So excited to have you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm looking forward to it.
So I just did a brief introduction of you and who you are to me. Why don't you start us off and let us know what you're up to in the world?
Sure. So this year I took on a new role. I'm the CEO at AutoCruitment, and AutoCruitment has been in the clinical trial patient recruitment industry for 10 years. We've worked across 120 conditions and enrolled over 12,000 patients. So prior to AutoCruitment, I've been in the clinical research space for about 17 years. And throughout that whole period, I've been involved in patient recruitment in different ways. So I've worked at Accurian, which was another patient recruitment company similar to AutoCruitment. I stayed with that company for about 14 years when it progressed into accelerated enrollment solutions, which included Accurian, the patient recruitment company, but also included a global site network of 180 sites. And ultimately, I was the general manager of that business. And then I left there and went to CVS for 3 years, where I led the patient recruitment business there, as well as real-world evidence. So been in this space for a long time, had seen patient recruitment and the need there from many different angles. So when the AutoCruitment opportunity came up, I was just very, very interested and excited about the opportunity to continue to work in this space, but also just really, really impressed with what AutoCruitment has done, because I've seen firsthand the need to really address, patient recruitment and AutoCruitment's ability to meaningfully do that.
I have to go to the fact that it's only, now we're in August at time of recording, so 8 months. What was it about AutoCruitment? I mean, you just mentioned, what attracted you, but what have you learned, and what do you love about what you're up to right now in your role as CEO?
Yeah, I think I was so excited about AutoCruitment because, as I mentioned, I've seen firsthand that there's a major opportunity to address the patient recruitment challenges. And I know that there's been many organizations that have done patient recruitment, have tried it, and ultimately just haven't been able to meaningfully address it across the board. And one of those reasons is that patient recruitment can work really easily in like chronic conditions like vaccines and diabetes, but it becomes way more challenging as you progress into some of the more severe disease states. And AutoCruitment's been able to do that, where we've been able to successfully recruit patients in the CNS space, in GI, et cetera. So that I felt that was really demonstrative of that there was something special that AutoCruitment was able to do to really be able to meaningfully contribute results in this space. So that's what attracted me to the business. When I got to know more about AutoCruitment, what I've grown to love is that I've been in different environments throughout my career. I started at a small company that got bought by a CRO. I ended up in CVS, which is a massive company. And I do really appreciate the energy that small companies bring, and the ability to really drive change, drive innovation really fast. and to, work with a team that's willing to collaborate and innovate. And that has definitely been present here at AutoCruitment. Having been a founder-run company for 10 years, having a very loyal employee base that contributed to that success and growth of the company, there's a real special spirit with this team. And the team here is very passionate about the problem and trying to pair patients up with clinical trials. So that has just, I really feel privileged to be able to join this organization and really lead it through its next chapter of growth.
Mm. And a question that we love to ask on the show is who you've become. The quote that we point to is from John Ruskin, that the reward of your work is not what you get from it, but who you become through it. As you enter now in the season of CEO at AutoCruitment, and maybe have some reflection on the journey of how you got here, who have you become?
Yeah, I think I feel very fortunate in the opportunities that I was given throughout my career. I've had a lot of really good mentors and leaders that have given me the opportunity to take on new roles and really challenge myself and grow my career successfully. So I feel very blessed in that aspect. And from where I feel that I've really grown and what I've really changed in my approach is really, I feel over the past couple of years that my confidence in my leadership has changed and grown. I've been in leadership positions since 2010. But I would say the last 5 years have been very different, where there were leadership positions where I was running businesses. And that was, a very different experience than just managerial positions. And I really grown to appreciate what my role is in doing that and growing a business. And it's way less about me and what I'm doing and how I'm perceived and what, my managers are thinking of me and where I can grow next. And I really have changed my focus around how do I create and set the right environment so that the teams that are under me can have the same growth experience, can have the same fulfillment from their jobs, and can really thrive and work together. And at being at AutoCruitment, one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot in that is how do I take that, that spirit that exists from the startup environment and maintain that, but then also bring in, new ideas, new team members so that we can scale and grow this. And that has required me to really think differently about the types of teams I bring in, but also how do I create the environment so they can continue to innovate, but also scale the business.
The distinction that comes to mind as you were talking was the shift from personal performance to impact. That your focus, what you're putting your focus on has shifted. Yeah. Is that a in a simple way of describing the shift that you've experienced of an attention and focus on personal performance and now to impact and the role and how you can have an impact on those you're serving?
I think that's right. I think you hear that right. I think the from my perspective, the thing that's changed in me to allow that transition is really my confidence. And I learn a lot from different leaders that I've worked with. And I feel like I've had exposure to a lot of different types of leadership that I pulled from every one of them to kind of think about what is going to be my unique leadership style. But I've also learned a lot from the people that I've been managing. And I think that's really where my confidence has grown, because as I coach and help other people, particularly other females that are working under me, move into leadership positions, I can see more firsthand, like, where are the hesitations and where are some of the things that are holding back female leaders. And being exposed to that over the past couple of years really helped me gain that confidence to really move into this position and really start focusing more on impact.
I'd love to just dive into that for a second. The mentorship, when you identify maybe those indicators of lack of confidence or things that are holding one back, how do you support in a mentorship or coaching way those folks that you see that in and that you want to invest in?
I think some of it is just people understanding that they can and that they're capable of it and they're ready to move to that next level. Some people are just waiting for somebody else to give them permission. And that's where I really see the difference between females and males, is that like women are less comfortable just stepping up into that position, be like, I'm ready to take on the next challenge. So sometimes it's just, letting them see it, putting them in an environment where they can stretch themselves, face some challenges and grow, and then gain that confidence that they are capable of stepping into that. The other thing I see too, that I just learned from personal experience and try to help coach women is there's often sometimes a guilt factor that comes up in terms of, if you're going to progress up in your career, that means it's going to make it harder for you to be present at home and take care of your kids and stuff. So I've tried to be really clear and transparent in helping them navigate that, because it's actually not true. The more you move up in your career, the more flexibility you actually get and your ability to, navigate both worlds.
Yeah. Well, as you were talking, I was reminded of one of the most powerful things a leader ever said to me. I believe in you. It feels like, whether you've said those exact words or not, but that's a message that you are continually conveying in your actions, in your words. You're saying, I believe in you. You can do this. Are those words that you heard at certain points by mentors, other leaders, where someone conveyed to you, Jill, I believe in you. You can do this?
It may not be those exact words, right? And that explicit, but by giving somebody the opportunity to step up into a stretch job, you're essentially communicating the same thing. Like, I'm going to ask you to take on this bigger task, this bigger role, expand your remit. And that hopefully is essentially communicating that I have the confidence and the organization has the confidence that you have the ability to step up into this.
What a gift. I'm It's so exciting to hear that people in the organization, or maybe just those that you're connected with, that you care about, get the benefit of that type of investment and that type of belief. It's so exciting. It's really exciting to hear you describe that. So the name of our show is Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having, or aren't having enough of. When you hear me cast the name of the show, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
That statement actually resonates very much, because I think about that a lot, being in the patient recruitment space. So from my lens, in looking and being in this space for so long, I've seen, if anybody's in this space, they're a well-known fact that clinical trials can be delayed. And a lot of times that's driven by enrollment. And that's a big problem, because that drives up the cost and the investment of doing the trial and ultimately the drug. And I've seen that one of the reasons I think that is happening is because the industry focuses so much on solving that problem through the lens of the sites. So when you're starting a clinical trial or you're starting to invest in a new drug and you're doing the planning for the trials, there's a lot of work that goes into the feasibility to understand how many sites they have to engage, which countries are going to have to open up, how are they going to find those sites. And there's a lot of work and investment that goes into those upfront decisions in the planning. But what we see time and time again is that the sites are very limited in their ability to access the wider patient population. At the end of the day, a very small percentage of physicians participate in research. And then as a result of that, a very small percentage of patients actually get the opportunity. So I've seen a lot of different stats on this, but it's anywhere between only 3 and 10% of the patient population ever hears about a trial. So that means there's 90% of the population that never actually gets the opportunity to participate in a trial, or the sites don't have access to. So what I really always like to push is, if you think about it from a site perspective, you do all the planning from that, and the patients are an afterthought, then you're going to be very limited in what you can do. And the industry has made a lot of progress in thinking about using patient recruitment companies. I see that's a lot more common now, especially as there's been a shift to being more intentional about putting in plans in place to increase the diversity of participation. But it's still an afterthought. It's still the last thing that's added on, and there's not always sufficient budget. So I think you need to flip that upside down, as opposed to planning from the site lens and then adding on all these new innovative strategies to find patients as a thing you add on at the end. You start with the patient strategy and you really plan around that. And that may end up looking very different for the way that you're planning your sites, your countries, and also the way that you're allocating the funds. You may end up putting more budget towards a patient strategy. But if you flip it around and do that first, then you can find the money elsewhere. So you got to think about it from the beginning to make sure that you're accounting for that in the entire plan.
So I imagine you have the opportunity to connect with, whether it's biotechs or pharma, drug development companies. What's the around this idea of start first with the patient when you're thinking about recruitment? What are the conversations or the questions you're asking those CEOs or leaders in those companies to start them thinking along these lines?
Yeah, the way that we think about it at AutoCruitment is so our ability to find the patients. We go very broad. We do a broad digital advertising campaign where we're trying to reach as much of that 90% as possible. And that's how we're able to bring volume and scale. But it's also really critical that we're not just going broad and that we're, throwing those patients to the sites, but that we're also properly qualifying them and making sure that they're going to be eligible for the trial. And they're not going to overburden the system and the sites that need to refer to them. So that's the way that we find the patients and solve this. And we've been effective in doing that, where in the trials that we've worked on, we've been able to, on average, double the enrollment rate. In some cases, it's been even higher than that. So we can show to clients that this is an effective strategy to find patients. But when you add it on as an afterthought, a lot of times what happens is it's a very small budget that's allocated to it. And they put it to the side and they only use it if they need it. They try to work with the sites, and only when they're not failing, then they're like, okay, let's go into the reserve funds and hire a recruitment vendor. But when you do that, it's just not as effective. But if you bring it in from the beginning, and we're able to demonstrate that we can double the enrollment rates in some cases. If you bring it up at the beginning, we might be able to triple the enrollment rates from the beginning. And if you plan for that and allocate that, you can be a lot more efficient. In trials where we've done that with sponsors, we've been able to save years in being able in the clinical trial timeline. And those years are very valuable to a pharmaceutical company getting that drug to market.
What's the mindset shift that's required by those companies to get them to start to see this process differently?
I think it's a mindset shift. It's really about the teams that are making the decisions around the vendors and patient recruitment vendors. If you're working with a large pharma company, they usually have a dedicated team in the company that would be working on patient recruitment. But that team is only engaged when the study teams think they need it. So it's really starting at those study teams and those people that are leading the development of the drug and making all the planning, that they need to be thinking about patient recruitment so that they can factor that into their plans from the start, as opposed to calling upon the teams later in the process where it's not as effective. And not every trial is getting patient recruitment support because of that.
It really speaks to creativity. And I think that's a word you even shared with me in one of our earlier conversations. And I don't know that that's a word that gets used a lot in the life science space. I mean, innovation,
Yeah.
problem solving, of course, but this word creativity, it feels like it's when someone gets it, well, to say right, and puts it in its proper role and engages somebody like AutoCruitment. What's really called for here is creativity. What do you see, whether from past experience or today AutoCruitment? What's that creativity look like from your team?
Yeah. I think there is a degree of creativity that's needed in order to be successful in recruiting the populations across a wide range of disease states. And the way that we think about it at AutoCruitment is that we don't think about it just from the clinical lens. Like that part is important. You have to consider the protocol requirements, the exact profile of the patient at what stage of their disease that they're in that you're looking to target for this particular trial. But that's just one aspect. The other aspect of it is when we think about it is it's really a marketing exercise where you are trying to engage a customer, a patient, with an opportunity, which happens to be a trial, as one of the choices that they're making in their healthcare as their next treatment option. So we like to call upon different industries and best practices and like e-commerce, or if you think about like if you work at Nike and you're trying to market sneakers to different populations, if you're trying to market that to teenagers versus an older population that's like an experienced athlete, you're going to think differently about the way you engage them, the messaging you put in front of them, and how you attract them to the product. And we kind of think about clinical trials the same way, where we're thinking about if we're looking, let's say we're taking about asthma, and we're looking for asthma patients that have asthma, but they're just taking their inhalers on really bad days, versus us looking for asthma patients that are very severe and are experiencing exacerbations that is life-threatening and putting them in the hospital. We're going to think about those two populations very differently in the way that we engage them in our messaging, what is going to be appealing to them to participate in a trial. So that's really where the creativity piece comes in. And then the part that we always want to reassure our customers of is that we're also making sure that it's following the protocol, that we're qualifying these patients. So we don't ignore the clinical aspect, but we think well beyond that.
Mm. Yeah. And you pointed to something before about what's at stake. We've had guests here that have spoken about the critical nature of clinical trials being successful. Mm-hmm. Could you just speak a little bit from your experience of what you see as at stake here in getting this right or doing this better?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, one key component to a successful clinical trial is finding the patients. Mm-hmm. And we see that the stats are pretty damning in that 80% of trials are delayed because of enrollment challenges. And we also see that some trials never actually finish. I think it's about 55% of trials never finish or get the opportunity to get that drug to market because of enrollment challenges. So that is very problematic up front in the R&D stage, where pharma companies are making significant investments in new treatments up front before they even get it to market and get to see some of that return. So they're making trade-off decisions. And because of that, they may not invest in everything. But I think the real thing that's at stake is really how's the downstream effects to patients when that happens? And I think in like my own life and what I'm exposed to in the healthcare system, there is a lot of advancements in medicine and in treatments that are available to patients across the board. And in the United States, there's really no limitation to what specialists you can see or what treatments you can get access to. But the unfortunate reality is that in a lot of cases, it's very cost prohibitive for people. I had a recent experience where I went to go see my dermatologist. I wanted to get a skin check. I haven't been there in a while. I'm fair skinned, wanted to get a check. So I was just in there for a regular routine appointment. I happened to have some poison ivy that I was recovering from, and they noticed it. It wasn't really bothering me, but they're like, well, we can give you a cream for that. And I'm like, okay, great. That would be awesome. Help this heal faster. But I went to the pharmacy to pick up my cream and it was $100. And I have insurance. And I walked out. I'm like, I'm not going to get this cream. So, I mean, that's just one example. But people who have chronic conditions, the medical cost is just, the burden on the patient is so significant. And obviously, a lot of things that factor into drug prices, but it does all start with that upfront investment and how much it costs to do that research and to get that drug ultimately into the hands of patients.
CEO said to me one time, he was talking about offshoring some of their work, and they were doing data analysis. And he was on a call with them, and he said, every piece of data you're looking at is a patient. And it completely transformed that relationship with that provider, that data analytics provider. I'm wondering, how do you, in your leadership, in your team's leadership, how do you make sure that the data that your team sees that every piece of data is a patient?
Yeah, I like that. That's interesting. So from our perspective, we know that every single patient that we are putting into a trial is very precious, has a cost to it. So as I shared, a lot of our strategy is going broad and really trying to reach a large audience to find more participants to participate in trials. But we don't stop there. There's a lot of work that's necessary to be able to hand over that patient population to the clinical trial sites and to make sure that they participate. So we do a lot of work in our team to make sure that we're targeting the right patients, because we want to make sure that it's a positive experience for them and that we're matching them to trials that ultimately be a good fit for them. But we're also doing that because we want to make sure that we're not sending the sites a whole bunch of people that wouldn't qualify. So we have a whole bunch of pre-screening services that we use to make sure that we're taking that large population and that we're narrowing that down to the ones that are most eligible. So we do an online pre-screener. We'll often follow up with a phone call to do a secondary phone call for some of those more intense disease states where you need a more medical in-depth review. And then we have a newer offering now where we're calling EMR capture and intelligence, where we're able to collect those patients' medical records on their behalf to qualify them. So we are just making sure that we're doing a lot of that upfront work to find those precious patients. And then once we hand them over to the sites, we don't stop there. We have an engagement team that works to make sure they're actually making it into the office. And that's something that we partner with the sites on to see what level of support do they need to help schedule these patients, answer the patient's questions. We find a lot, and it shouldn't be surprising that when patients hear about a clinical trial, they have a lot of questions, in a lot of cases, it's their first time participating in a trial. So our engagement team will often help with that and really be a customer service support arm to the sites to make sure that those patients' questions are answered and that they're making it into the trials.
And some drug development and biotechs, they'll have patient days where a patient will actually come and speak. And I don't know if that's a strategy for you, but for them, it makes it very real for the employees that this is a real person or these are real people. What are some of the strategies you take to ensure that your team knows and sees, well, this is a real person that I'm engaging with?
Yeah, it's a good question you're raising, because I think a lot of people in this space often forget that, right? Like they get so involved in, the contract commitments that we have. And so I think it's something that it's top of mind for me and my leadership team. And it's something we probably could do a better job of and do more of. But when we're doing town halls and we're getting together with the teams, we are making an attempt to try to always bring it back to our mission and why we're here and how we're helping people. So as I shared, we've worked in 120 conditions. We work across a lot of different disease states. So we'll often just bring examples. Like we'll talk about women's health at one meeting, and then we'll talk about pain trials or depression in another meeting, just to kind of bring it back to that that core mission that at the end of the day, we are helping patients use clinical trials as a way to get access to new treatments.
Yeah, I love just repeat it, communicate it clearly and consistently.
Yeah.
Jill, I'm going to give you a magic wand here for a moment, and you get to, by the wave of this wand, you get to plant a seed in the minds of every life science CEO, one conversation that they're going to have over this coming week, whether with their team, whether with investors, the broader community, the public, but one conversation that they're going to have over the next week. What's that one conversation that you're going to plant the seed for with the wave of this wand?
Yeah. So at AutoCruitment, we our brand and our motto is unlock the power of the patient. And the reason why we emphasize on that is because a lot of the things that I touched upon in that we feel that clinical trial enrollment and clinical trial research is really held back by the fact that everything is focused from a site lens and it's very limiting on the patients. And you can really unlock clinical trial participation when you're going direct to the patients. And there's a lot of technologies and advancements now, and the companies are driving around getting better access to records, better access to data, using AI-powered technology to do that. But all of that is limited behind HIPAA rules. So you have to go through the sites or you have to go through the providers. So we feel at AutoCruitment, the way to really unlock the power of that is you put the patient at the center and the front and center of the research. That helps with clinical trials, but that also helps across all of medical science. There's many other areas where that need for patient data, medical data is really going to help advance medical science, and putting patients at the center is one way you can really unlock that.
So what's the conversation you want them, or the question to ask their team? What's that conversation that you want them to have this week?
It's what are you doing to make sure that you are opening up and having strategies to go direct to patient.
Love it. I love the simplicity and the directness of that. As we conclude our conversation, Jill, what would you love to highlight about AutoCruitment and what's going on right now with you guys?
Yeah. So at AutoCruitment, as I shared, we've been around for 10 years. We've done work across 120 conditions, and we've enrolled over 12,000 patients in trials. So our primary focus now is how do we get better at that? How do we really help our customers advance their efforts in research? And we're investing in a lot of innovative solutions to do that. Our EMR capture intelligence is something brand new this year. That's really helping us to reach patient populations more deeply in some of those harder conditions. And we've been very effective at helping our customers in increasing enrollment rates, doubling it in most cases. And we'd love the opportunity to expand that and share that with people that need help in clinical trials.
And if folks want to know more or connect with you, where can we send them?
We have AutoCruitment.com. You can go directly to there, or you can reach out to me, but you can submit a request on there and we'll follow up.
Awesome. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes so people can easily find that. Jill, this has been a lot of fun. I'm excited for you, what you're up to at AutoCruitment, and just thank you so much for being a guest today.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.